Someone you love is gone. The body is still warm, and you have absolutely no idea what to do next. That feeling, as said, that frozen, hollow bewilderment, ice is one of the most human things you will ever experience. But here is what nobody tells you. The rituals you follow in the days after a death, the flowers, the caskets, the eulogies, the black clothes, the way everyone gathers and eats and whispers, none of that is modern. None of it is civilized. All of it is ancient, and the real story of what your ancestors did when someone died is far stranger, far more intimate, and far more revealing than anything you were taught. This is not a story about grief. This is a story about what grief made humans do for a very, very long time. Let's go back further than you think. The year is roughly 430,000 BCE. You are in a place that will one day be called Spain, deep inside a cave system called Atapuerca, a group of early humans, not quite Homo sapiens but close enough to feel familiar, carry a body. They move through total darkness. They lower the dead into a shaft in the earth. Archaeologists would not find these remains until 1997. When they did, they found the bones of at least 28 individuals, deliberately placed, not scattered, not abandoned, placed. This is the oldest known burial site on Earth, and what it tells you is uncomfortable, because it means that before your species had language sophisticated enough to write anything down, before agriculture, before cities, before every institution you take for granted, your ancestors were already asking the same question you ask when someone dies. What do we do now? The answer, it turns out, was almost never nothing. Paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkhaus spent decades studying Neanderthal burial sites, and what he found shattered the assumption that our extinct cousins were brutes. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal buried roughly 60,000 years ago was found surrounded by what appeared to be clusters of pollen from flowers: yarrow, groundsel, ragwort, grape, hyacinth. The interpretation has been debated. Some researchers argue the flowers were carried in by burrowing rodents after the fact. But others, including Trinkas, point to the positioning of the body itself as evidence of intentional care. The man had been badly injured. He was missing an arm, had a crushed eye socket, healed fractures across his body. He had survived for years with those injuries, which means others kept him alive. And when he finally died, they did not simply walk away, caring for the injured, burying the dead. These are not small behaviors. These are behaviors that require you to feel something about another person, to believe on some level that their body still matters after the breath has left it. But why? Why does a body matter once the person is gone? The anthropologist Robert Hertz published a foundational essay in 1907 arguing that death rituals are not really about the dead at all. They are about the living. They are about managing the rupture that death creates in a social group. When someone dies, a hole opens. The rituals, the washing, the watching, the carrying, the burying, the mourning, are stitches. They close the wound. They let the community keep functioning. Your ancestors understood this without ever reading Hertz. They understood it in their bones. In what is now the Czech Republic, archaeologists discovered burial sites from roughly 34,000 years ago belonging to Homo sapiens, your direct ancestors. The bodies were covered in red ochre, a pigment made from iron oxide, ground into powder and rubbed across the skin and bones of the dead. Red ochre appears in burial sites across every inhabited continent: Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, the Americas. It is one of the most consistent behaviors in all of human prehistory. Nobody told everyone to do it. There was no global memo. But somehow, independently, again and again, across tens of thousands of years, humans looked at their dead and reached for the color red. Why red? Nobody knows for certain. Some researchers believe it represented blood, life, vitality, the hope of continuation. Others think it was simply the most powerful pigment available, used to mark something as important. Whatever the reason, the act itself is staggering. It means your ancestors did not just remove the dead from the group. They prepared them. They decorated them. They sent them somewhere, wherever that somewhere was, dressed for the journey. And it was not just ochre. At Sungir, a site outside Moscow, archaeologists found the bodies of an older man and two adolescents buried together roughly 30,000 years ago. They were covered in more than 13,000 ivory beads, beads that would have taken an estimated 10,000 hours to carve. 10,000 hours! That is more than a year of constant work, not sleeping, not eating, just carving beads to cover the dead bodies of three people. This was not a casual gesture. This was an enormous investment of time and labor poured entirely into the burial of people who were already gone. What does that tell you? It tells you that your ancestors believed death was not an ending, or at least they behaved as though they believed that. Whether the belief came first or the ritual came first and the belief followed, nobody can say. But the evidence is clear. They were not practical about the dead, they were extravagant. Now jump forward, not to today, not yet, to ancient Egypt roughly 4,500 years ago. The Egyptians are the most famous example of elaborate death ritual, and with good reason. But what most people miss is how physical their relationship with the dead was. Mummification was not a symbol, it was a biological intervention. The Egyptians believed the soul, the ka, needed the body to return to after death, not a representation of the body, the actual body. So they removed the organs, dried the flesh with natron salt, wrapped the remains in linen soaked in resins, and worked to make the body last as long as physically possible. They were trying to give the dead somewhere to come home to. And they visited. Priests made daily offerings at tombs. Food, beer, linen, incense. The dead were not gone, they were just elsewhere, and the living maintained the relationship. This is a pattern you find everywhere. In ancient China, the dead were buried with everything they would need. Food, tools, servants, in some cases entire armies of terracotta soldiers. In ancient Mesopotamia, royal tombs at Ur contained the bodies of dozens of attendants who were killed and buried alongside their rulers, so the king would not arrive in the afterlife without staff. In pre-Columbian Mexico, the dead were given obsidian blades, jade beads, and ceramic pots of food for the road. Across sub-Saharan Africa, elaborate ancestral ceremonies kept the dead present as forces in daily life, consulted, appeased, feared, honored. The dead were not gone. The dead were busy. In Madagascar, there is a practice called famadahana, the turning of the bones. Every few years, families open their family crypts, remove the bodies of their ancestors, rewrap them in fresh silk shrouds, and dance with them. They share news. They introduce the dead to relatives who were born since the last ceremony. They ask for blessings. Then they put the ancestors back and close the crypt again until next time. To an outside observer, this might seem shocking, but to the families participating, it is simply maintenance. It is keeping the relationship alive. And that word, relationship, is the key to everything. What your ancestors did when someone died was not process a loss. It was renegotiate a relationship. Because in almost every culture, across almost all of human history, death did not end your connection to the dead person. It changed the form of the connection. The dead became ancestors, guides, protectors, or warnings, or threats. But they did not simply stop existing in the social life of the community. Psychologist Robert Kastenbaum, who spent his career studying death and dying, argued that what modern Western culture has done, sequestering death in hospitals, outsourcing the body to professionals, grieving quickly, and then returning to productivity, is historically aberrant. For most of human existence, death was not something that happened to you behind closed doors and was then managed by strangers. It happened in front of you. The body stayed with you. You washed it. You sat with it. You processed it. What this meant, practically, was that you could not avoid understanding what death was. You were not protected from it. You grew up knowing exactly what a dead body looked, smelled, and felt like. And paradoxically, that familiarity seems to have made death less terrifying, not more. The practices were designed to make the incomprehensible manageable, to give grief somewhere to go. Think about the last time you attended a funeral, the order of events, the flowers, the gathering afterward, the stories people tell. You probably did not invent any of that. You inherited it. It was handed to you across a chain of humans going back further than your name, further than your language, further than any civilization you can point to on a map. The flowers, the gathering, the food, the stories, the ceremony. 34,000 years ago, someone covered a body in red ochre and believed, or needed to believe, that it mattered, that the dead person was still somewhere, that the relationship was not over. Tonight, when someone you know mentions a funeral or a wake or a memorial, when you feel that pull toward gathering, toward ritual, toward doing something with your hands in the face of the incomprehensible, you're not following a custom. You are following a current that has run through every human who ever stood over a body and refused to simply walk away. You have been doing this since before you had words for it. You have always known somewhere older than thought that the dead deserve more than nothing.